Illiterate. That was kind of the attitude that we grew up in. So lo and behold, I go to America, I do my PhD, and there I get introduced to actually Buddhism. We had to do an out-of-department course. And as I began listening, I thought, gee, this is actually what I was looking for. This is what really has the answers. And then I heard of this person called His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which I did not have the good fortune to hear of when I was in India, and started attending his lectures. And each time I went to his teaching, I would feel profoundly moved and inspired. But then I would leave the texts on my shelf, it would collect dust, till the next year he came, and this kind of went on for some time. Till, finally I got my PhD, I had my certificate, and I realized at that point, I had the certificate in clinical psychology after working all these years to do a lot of damage. Because when I looked at myself, in heart of hearts, I have to admit, I really was not a kinder, gentler, or a better person. I had a lot of information. And when people came, I could give them a lot of theory. But really to find a way to transform people's hearts and minds, I realized in all honesty, I really didn't have those skills. So that's what also really began to lead me to search. And I felt Buddhism had the answers, so I slowly began studying more and more of it. And the more I did, the more inspired I became, and the more I realized that is where I had to dedicate my life to. So I came back to India, recognizing I had taken a full circle, spent all these years going to the West, looking for answers that was right back home in my backyard. That's the ancient story of you're looking for this precious jewel and you go all around the world and then you find out it was right there in front of you all the time. But it took me that much time to find it. So coming back, what was the best thing I could do? I feel very, very fortunate to have met Gyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who is a very close heart disciple of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and some of you may already know him. And he suggested that it would help if I volunteered at this center and took charge of it. And that is no easy task. But there's a very important role that Dharma centers play. You may have heard of Tibet House. Rinpoche talks about Dharma centers being like crisis mental health or mental emergency centers. When if you think of our world and look around in our world, there's so much chaos, there's so much confusion. If we really desire happiness and we wish to avoid suffering, very often we are confused. But what is it that really makes us happy? What really helps us to avoid suffering? Very often we think we are chasing happiness when in fact we are actually going after suffering, creating more suffering for ourselves and others. So the idea of having to be educated in the Dharma is very important. And that is a very important component of Dharma centers. And as Bhaskar has said, we also teach in the Nalanda tradition. It's the Nalanda scholars that are introduced. And from September through April, we have Western and Tibetan scholars coming in, teaching a variety of courses, introductory courses, intermediate courses, retreats, and we also have a residential geshe. And by the way, this is another thing to understand. Somehow when we think of monasteries, again we think of these strange people in robes chanting things and ringing bells and really being uneducated. The Tibetan monastic education, if we think of a PhD that takes an average of 6 to 7 years, a good monastic education takes about 17 to 20 years. And it takes dedicated study, because this, again, we talked about this somewhat in the morning. It's not a dichotomy between faith and study and logic and reasoning. In fact, Buddhism tends to combine a systematic process of study which involves logic and reasoning combined with faith. I'll talk about this more a little bit tomorrow. So they are not contradictory. They have to go hand in hand. In fact, one of the big reliefs with Buddhism for me was that I could ask questions. That's not blasphemy. And also the idea that in Buddhism, part of what we are trying to do is become like the Buddha, or become the Buddha. That means we have the ability to transform our hearts and minds in a way that we can actually become. And what does it mean to become a Buddha? Whatever Buddha you're talking about, it just means somebody who's fully awakened. Somebody who started out, ordinary beings like us, with our kleshas or our afflictions that, our attachments and aversions. But because we have this Buddha nature within us, we have the ability